From code to smart contracts, it's like AI's evolution. AI agents' future might depend less on code and more on rules on how they play together with them all over the place. Smart contracts are creating more flexible and accountable AI systems. It's actually quite simple. The realization that traditional programming is not enough. We can't program ethics, morality, and regulations necessarily, or at least in every case. Smart contracts as a control mechanism is really interesting and kind of obvious, isn't it? So you were I noticed you referenced smart contracts as another level of this. How are these working with smart contracts, or what were you were sharing something there that would like to zoom in, as you say?
Yeah. So here's the thing. If I come from a sort of non-crypto standpoint, let me try to explain it a bit. The first thing is if you want an agent to affect something in the real world or in the digital world,
Right.
it often helps if the agent can have funds. And so if you imagine every agent having to have a Stripe account or some bank account, that's not very practical today. I mean, maybe there's startups now who are kind of working on some sort of Web2 like solutions for this. But even then, you still have this issue where you have a layer of permissioning. And that can sometimes be a good thing, but broadly speaking, it's just a lot of friction. And so one thing which smart contracts enable is these sort of smart accounts. So you can think of them like a wallet with rules on top. So rather than saying to the agent, oh, here you have a bunch of funds and now go do with it, you can say, here's a bunch of funds, but you're constrained to only do X, and it's constrained by cryptography. So the agent can just work around it. If it wants to use these funds, it's constrained within this kind of design space. So that's one very concrete example where sort of smart contracts deployed on blockchains can help sort of limit the design, the working space of the agent, but at the same time also unlock the agent because you can sort of immediately spin one up. But I want to add another example, which is that around sort of coordination, right? So if you think about agents, the interesting use cases we find are those where you have multi-agent systems. Because then you can have a single agent specialize in something specific, and then the actual product someone consumes is sort of the emergent outcome of those agent interactions. So this predict use case, which I mentioned earlier, is an example of that. So what people care about and other AI agents care about are these prediction market outcomes. So for instance, this can be a binary event like who will be the next president. So people care about that. But how that comes together is that lots of different agents, software agents and human agents have to participate in these markets in various different forms. Someone has to open these markets, provide liquidity into them. Someone has to arbitrate these markets. Someone has to trade in these markets. That's the largest group. And so effectively, what you can do, and that's what we've done, is use smart contracts to create specific incentives around these different roles to be fulfilled. And so you can effectively think of this, going back to this earlier analogy, like a sort of really big agent business, right? Where sort of the smart contract sets the rules, the KPIs for these software agents then to come and show up for work to do these very specific things.
So the smart contracts really are what everyone's scared about: autonomous agents doing whatever they want, and things like that. But it actually is that's an interesting form of rule setting that's not used in traditional AI agents that I'm seeing, who are sort of trying to program ethics or morality or whatever words which sound really good. But that actually makes a ton of sense that it's in the contract. So it's almost like, and I know your background is in game theory, so it's almost like in terms of aligning incentives with the stakeholders, are smart contracts, along with other things, really one of the really core things that help align the incentives and don't let it just sort of get out of control?
Yeah. So when we talk about alignment, I think there's a sort of internal, external, maybe that's not the right word, but the kind of how do I align a specific AI program? And then how do I align the societies of AI? They're two different things that to a degree overlap. What you can, as I said at the very beginning, I don't think it's helpful and I don't think it's helpful to think of this sort of singular AI system which will rule us all, because I also don't think it's very likely. I think we should design for a world where there's competition amongst AIs, there's competition amongst humans, and that is also a very likely outcome actually. So if you think about this world, there's many different AI systems, and it's a question not just of like aligning a specific AI system with the goals of its owner, right? So which again could be like a single human or a group of human or whatever, or government. But it's also interesting to ask, okay, if we have multiple of them, like what will happen if they interact? And so how can we align some of them to contribute to certain outcomes, right? And so that's sort of like, to give another analogy, that's what we do with like rules and regulation, and like when they're done well, right, on a state level or a regional level, we set certain rules to kind of try to get society to move in a certain way. And the way we use smart contracts is in that way. We effectively set a certain amount of like incentives on a blockchain to like bring about a certain outcome. This, in a way, the same way you do it as a business owner. You know, you can't like ultimately like be there and guide every single step of your employee. Then you could do the work yourself. Instead, you set certain KPIs and incentives for your employees to kind of bring about whatever you care bringing about.